Hey friends, thanks for checking in again today. Just wanted to spend a few minutes in the Word with you and let that Word sink down and minister to your own spirit and to mine as we spend these moments together. So last week we were looking at Exodus chapter 14. We had talked about how Pharaoh and his armies, he brought out all of his armies, all his chariots, all his horsemen, had pursued the Israelites, and the Israelites were against the Red Sea, with Pharaoh and his armies forming a wall against them, basically, and the Red Sea a barrier in front of them. And Moses had said to them in that story to stand still and see the deliverance that the Lord will bring to you. I had people that wrote me and were just really impacted by that phrase, that idea of God saying, stop fretting and worrying, stand still. Such a great word. So that's where we left them. What happened since then is God had moved his presence, the presence of God in the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire. God moved from in front of to behind the Israelites and became a wall himself between the Israelites and the Egyptians, with darkness on the side of the Egyptians and light on the side of Israel. And that it also told Moses that he was going to take the rod in his hand to stretch it out over the sea. And that's where our story today begins. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and God sent an east wind that blew back the sea and separated the waters and created a path of dry ground between the waters in the sea. And Israel went into the sea, walking on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and a wall of water on their left. And the Egyptians followed Israel, pursued Israel into the sea. And in the fourth watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud and saw that the Egyptians were pursuing the Israelites, and so troubled the Egyptians, threw their armies into confusion. He caused chariot wheels to come off the chariots, hindering their pursuit. And the Egyptians said, God is fighting on behalf of Israel. Let's stop. Let's get away from Israel. I said that wrong. They said, let's get away from the Israelites, for God is fighting Egypt on behalf of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the waters, that the waters will begin to flow back over the Egyptians and their horses and their chariots. And so Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea went back into place, and the Egyptians fled from the sea, but were covered by it, and none of them survived. But the Israelites came through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. And they saw the Egyptian bodies floating on the shore. And they saw the great deliverance that God had given them. And they put their faith in God. They feared God and believed in God and believed in Moses. I didn't say that as clearly as I wanted to, but you get the picture. So Moses had stuck his hand out, God split the sea, and you have them walking through, not shallow waters, a wall of water on their right and on their left. Can you imagine the impact of that experience on those people and on their children to come through a sea on dry ground? And what might we learn about the Egyptians and what they believed about the God of Israel, that they said, let's get away from the Israelites because the Lord is fighting Egypt on behalf of Israel. What do they believe about God there? Did they believe there was such a God? They did, didn't they? And they believed that that God actually was making a difference in their lives. And yet, even with that belief in the power of God to fight them in that manner, they still would not trust that God. Isn't that remarkable? And so they're pursuing, and yet And apparently they pursued for some time. The fourth watch of the night is when God looked down and saw that happening. And So Israel is ahead of them, going through the sea on dry ground. This is such a picture of deliverance. There was no way yesterday. Remember, the people were between a rock and a hard place. They were between the sea, and they had a wall behind them. The way back to Egypt had been closed. They were between the two, and there was no way. But God made a way where there was no way. I love that picture, that God will make a way where there is no way. Are any of you looking for a way to be made in your life? Are you believing that the way is shut, that there is no way to be able to go forward in the path that you are on? Is that a belief you have, or is that truth? God does make ways. We see it in this passage, right? He made a way from the Israelites and gave a display to them that those who pursue them, the enemies that are coming against them, will not conquer them. Of course, it's kind of a grisly scene. I realize the army perishing, but the only reason the army perished was because they thought they were more powerful than God and wanted to take God on. They wouldn't believe what they already knew, that there is a God in Israel, and he had already taken on the gods of Egypt. They wouldn't believe what they already knew, and so therefore pursued Israel in defiance against who God is and what God could do. So it's a fascinating thing. But God allowed Moses to be a participant in this miracle. What impact might that have had on Moses? That it was his hand that stretched over the sea, that opened the sea. How might that have impacted his leadership of the people? And what hope is there for the people now as they fear and believe in God and believe in their leader Moses? Which unfortunately for the people, if you know the story, doesn't last as long as you wish it would last. But for us today, I don't know if you have a place in your life that feels like you're at a dead end, but I want you to hear the word. God makes ways open up for his people, and he'll make a way for you. May you continue to have confidence and hope in the greatness of the God that the Egyptians even believed in, but didn't obey. And the Israelites believed him and began to fear. May you have a great faith for the way that'll open for you, and may you trust God in your life, friends. Trust him in your life. In this season, this ongoing forever season, trust him with the good way he's going to make for you. Blessings. Great to take a moment with you today.